Blog Talk Radio.
We'll never see you again.
I dearly hope so, my prince. There is so much more I meant to tell you. Everything you know is about to change.
American Daily Review.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. Where then is the road to peace? Well, there's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance.
When America needed them most, two men rose to the occasion. Doug Gibbs of Constitution Radio and PoliticalPistachio.com. Jasmius of PoliticalPistachio.com, Constitution Radio, and the Hard Starboard Radio Network. This is American Daily Review on blogtalkradio.com.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me and I walk alone. this empty street on the boulevard of broken dreams, where the city sleeps and I'm the only one. And I walk up my shadow's the only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone up there will find me. Till then I walk alone.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me. You're it? You're black plastic!
No, Jasmius.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game! It's all about the game, and how you play it, all about control. And if you can take it, all about your stay. And if you can play it, it's all about pay. Who's gonna make it? I am the game, you don't wanna play me. I am control, no way you can shake me. I am heavy debt, no way you can pay me. I am the pain, and I know you can't take me. Look over your shoulder, ready to run like a Cleveland fish from a smoking gun. I am the game, and I may do.
Welcome to the Saturday afternoon extravaganza solo, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, that's right. My good, close, personal friend online and offline and everywhere in between, cohort, comrade in arms, Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs, is at an undisclosed location for an undisclosed purpose. Now, I could speculate on what these things are, but I'm actually privy to the undisclosed purpose and the undisclosed location. So, let's see. I got to come up with a cover story. He's working on his next book. Yeah, we'll go with that. He's working on his next book, and we'll just leave it at that. Or you can just fill in your own explanation. Speculate to your heart's content in the chat room. Cog, Lady Michelle, and Brenda are already in the chat room, so the hordes of ADR Nation are filing in for the beginning, the kickoff. It's already kicked off 10 minutes ago, of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza, beginning here with American Daily Review, a featured podcast of blogtalkradio.com and a production of the Hard Starboard Radio Network, which airs Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. And, of course, here at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. Yes, we're slashers, ladies and gentlemen. There are over 5 years' worth of podcasts for your downloading pleasure, your education, edification, enlightenment, and entertainment, enjoyment, and ecstasy, and all your life's endeavors. So download, just go berserk downloading each and every podcast in the history of American Daily Review. And if you have any spare time and any spare bandwidth left, go on over to blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network, because you're going to find 7 years plus. Including, they tend to pile up quickly when you switch from a weekly podcast to a daily one, which we did 14 months ago on the Hard Starboard Radio Network. So have fun over there. You might want to go out to like Office Depot or Best Buy and get a terabyte external drive just to hold them all. It's an investment well worth making, ladies and gentlemen. Now, like I say, Doug is away today, so as you may have already deduced, and I only learned about this at about 8:30 this morning, not only is Mr. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, not going to be on American Daily Review today, he's not going to be on AM 1050, KCAA, and also FM 106.7, and the Inland Talk Express, where no listener is left behind. Not going to be on Constitution Radio today either, so guess who has gotten tapped to host Constitution Radio? Yes, Alex Ferguson will do a great job. No, I'm kidding. Alex Ferguson is great. I can hardly wait to meet him in person as things move forward on the radio syndication front 5 days a week, turning the Saturday afternoon extravaganza from a 3-hour program on 2 venues 1 day a week to a 3-hour program on 1 venue 5 days a week through the blowtorch of the flagship station, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 106.7, and, of course, globally through kcaaradio.com. So that's what's going on today. I'm flying solo on American Daily Review. I'm sitting in for Mr. Gibbs later on today on Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs on AM 1050, KCAA, FM 106.7, and, of course, kcaaradio.com, where the guest will be Waleed Shoebat, ladies and gentlemen. The former... There aren't very many ex-jihadists that are still living. Waleed Shoebat, the former PLO terrorist, former jihadist, convert to Christianity in 1994, and if the caliphate's worst nightmare. So that will be the guest today, and what else we got? We got the fact that, Murrieta, California's mayor, well, now former mayor, and now let's just put it this way, Alan Long is not going to be the once and future king. I believe it was E.G. White who wrote a book once called The Once and Future King. It was featured prominently in the first few X-Men. Actually, it was an X-Men... Was it an X-Men? No, it's X-Men 2, X-Men United. The Once and Future King by E.G. White or E.T. White or E.W. White. But E something White. I forget the middle initial. And Alan Long is not going to be the Murrieta's version of the Once and Future King, because former Murrieta Mayor Alan Long had his lab work come back on his blood alcohol level from when he was arrested after rear-ending a sedan full of 4 teenage girls with his large pickup truck. And his blood alcohol level turns out to have been 0.08, which is above the legal limit. 0.08 is the legal limit for blood alcohol level in California for DUI cases, and it was above 0.08 for former Mayor Alan Long. So, you know how we talked about a couple of weeks ago that his life has changed? Something like that happens. You screw up, and it might not just have changed the lives of the 4 teenage girls who got rear-ended, including the one who has a neck injury and is still in the hospital. Well, now it has for Alan Long as well. Because 0.08, he could be looking at as long as 9 years in prison. So forget, because he'd been talking about, I'm gonna stay in the race to get he resigned the mayoralty of Murrieta, California, but he kept his name on the ballot. He didn't withdraw from the race because he figured, wow, it'll come back and the blood alcohol level will not be above the legal limit. I can just stay in the race and I can become mayor again, once and future king. Well, that ain't gonna happen. Forget being mayor. Forget Murrieta city politics or any other political ambitions he had. Forget his job, his career as a fire department official. He's got big problems now that they're gonna be occupying him for the foreseeable future. And like I say, he could be looking at up to 9 years in prison. And Doug wrote a piece about it at politicalpistachio.com this morning, which I have been asked to and will be reading verbatim to kick off Constitution Radio later today. The third hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific at kcaaradio.com. Globally, KCAA AM 1050, FM 106.7. The Inland Talk Express, where no listeners left behind locally in the Southern California Inland Empire area. So there's the Alan Long announcement. There's the Waleed Shabbat interview. I got to make sure I pronounce that correctly. It's Shabbat, not Shabbat, Shabbat. I keep wanting to say Shabbat. I asked Doug this morning on the phone. It's Waleed Shabbat. And as he helpfully mentioned, well, if you get it wrong, Waleed will be happy to correct it for you. So I may also have to explain, no, this is not Mr. Pistachio. This is Mr. Hard Starboard. But eliminating any confusion. I should mention guest call-in number here, 646-595-4520. My email address, jasmy@comcast.net. I'm looking at all my interview questions, and I got to interview Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America when I filled in for Doug about a year and a half. What was it, a year and a half? No, it was a year and 9 months ago. No, a year, 8 months, and 2 weeks ago. That's what it was. So this will be another profound honor. And then, of course, we'll have the book of the week, Stonewalled by Cheryl Atkinson, the ex-CBS News reporter, or as the White House refers to her, that unreasonable reporter, or referred to her since she's no longer at CBS, that unreasonable reporter at CBS News. Yeah, her book has come out, and it's a doozy. I understand Alex Ferguson wants to talk about it, expound upon it at length. And, of course, the Constitution Quest discussion of the week. It won't be the Constitution Quest question. It'll be the Constitution Quest discussion of the week. We'll clear the air on the matter of express versus implied powers of the Constitution and its intersection with the necessary and proper clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. So that will be an interesting discussion you won't want to miss. And then, of course, the big stories of the week, which we're going to dive into here momentarily. There are only 9 of them this week, ladies and gentlemen. So I guess that means that it was a slow week. And I have it on good authority that while she won't be able to join us for the Big Stories of the Week segment later on today on KCAA, my good close personal online friend of over 20 years from the Hoosier state of Indiana, the Hoosier gal, Jennifer, is going to call in today in hour number 2, the middle hour, the halftime show of American Daily Review today. So that's also something to put on the plate, and I really should. I mean plate literally, because I had, what was it, 7 plates yesterday at Old Country Buffet, where intern Missius took me for my half-century birthday, or as I refer to it, the countdown to death. But it was great. It reminded me of 2 things. 1, I love buffets, smorgasbords, and 2, there's probably a pretty good reason why I don't patronize smorgasbords nearly as much as I used to. So, yeah, 50. See, there's one problem, and one problem only with mentioning, well, I just turned 50 on the air, and that is that I don't know the ages of all the people in the chat room. So if I go on what I would love to do, what I almost reflexively do, which is go on about how old I am, and I'm old, you know. Here, Dad, take your pill. Ah, barnacles, I hate the pill. You know, Mr. Krabs riff, back when SpongeBob was actually kind of entertaining rather than rainbow-colored, if you follow my drift. Hey, Patrick, what is it, SpongeBob? How would you like to sit... Never mind. So I feel inhibited in doing that, although I suppose in a roundabout way I just did. So that's just, I'm instinctively a great blogcaster, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, when it comes to later on KCAA, you know, I will be praying. Well, I've done it before, so it's no big deal. But I will still be praying the test pilot's prayer. Lord, don't let me screw up. It'll be just fine. Yeah, like the Cylons used to say in the remake of Battlestar Galactica, all this has happened before, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we want to start out today with story number 9. And I just have to find it here in the queue. Oh, yeah, here it is, because I got some other tabs up pertaining to the Waleed Shabat interview and Cheryl Atkinson's book, and which is the book of the week, Stonewalled, by former unreasonable CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson. I love that. Oh, you're so unreasonable. Everybody, Times is reasonable. The Washington Post is reasonable. You're just so unreasonable. Yeah, MSNBC, well, no, we even think they're nuts, but it works in our favor. So, but story number 9, and some of these will get more time than others. You know, I feel that's the other thing. I don't have to herd Doug along, because Doug doesn't have the, you know, God bless Doug. He admits this. He admits this. You know, God bless Doug, but he doesn't always have the best on-air discipline as far as sticking to the show schedule. So, and so I mentioned it sometimes on American Daily Review, and when it's like 10 minutes after 1 on Pacific time, and we're still on like story 8, and we got to move this along, to do it tactfully. And of course, I don't really have to be tactful with Doug, because he knows, number 1, and number 2, we like to bust each other's chops anyway, as good, close, personal friends and comrades in arms tend to do. But the drawback is that I've got to move myself along, and my classic trademark verbosity, so I shall endeavor to do so. Story number 9. A tough day for space, for not for space travel necessarily, because, of course, well, maybe I don't have to make that distinction, because we really don't have a government space program anymore, at least not a manned one. Space travel, if there's going to be space travel going forward, it's going to be coming out of the private sector. And that's what made yesterday, I believe it was yesterday. Let me find if there's a date here. Yeah, it was yesterday. Just yesterday. Tough day for private sector space travel. Tough day for manned space travel, period, because there is no public sector manned space flight anymore. I mean, unless you want to count bumming a ride with the Russians, which is such a mixed blessing situation, shall we say. Virgin Galactic's spaceship crashed yesterday. Spaceship 2 specifically. It crashed in the Mojave Desert yesterday during a test flight. One test pilot was killed, another injured. Now, this is from the LA Times. Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2, part of an ambitious commercial space venture founded by British billionaire Richard Branson, crashed during testing Friday and broke into several pieces over the Mojave Desert. One test pilot was killed and another was injured. Space is hard and today was a tough day, said George Whitesides. George Whitesides. Whitesides. Is that his real surname? Whitesides? I don't know. We'll take his word for it. George Whitesides, of course, is the CEO of Virgin Galactic. The future rests in many ways on hard days like this, but we believe we owe it to the folks who were flying these vehicles to move forward, which is what we will do, Mr. Whitesides said. The news of the second catastrophic accident in a week, so this wasn't the first one, this was the second one, has sent tremors through the heretofore burgeoning commercial space industry and is sure to create questions about its future. 2 pilots were aboard Spaceship Two, company and FAA officials confirmed. That's Federal Aviation Administration. According to the California Highway Patrol, one of the pilots was able to eject and parachute out of the aircraft before being airlifted to a hospital. The other pilot was killed in the crash. I guess he couldn't eject. Their names have not been released. The White Knight 2 aircraft, which carries the Spaceship 2 test vehicle, landed safely. National Transportation Safety Board investigators were on their way to the site, which the Kern County Sheriff said was spread over 5 debris fields over a 2 to 3 mile area. Oh, what a fun task. The rocket plane was using a new fuel formulation. Well, that was probably it, said Kevin Mickey, CEO of Scaled Composites, which conducted Friday's test flight. The new fuel mixture had been tested and proven on the ground many times, but apparently not in the air yet. That's what Kevin Mickey said. Virgin Galactic has engaged in a nearly decade-long endeavor to produce the world's first commercial space liner, which would make several trips a day carrying scores of paying customers into space for a brief journey. It announced an agreement in May with the Federal Aviation Administration that helped clear the path to send paying customers on a suborbital flight by setting parameters for how routine missions to space would take place in national airspace. Friday's test was the company's first rocket-powered test flight in 9 months. Scaled Composites was conducting the test flight in partnership with Virgin Galactic, and its CEO said the flight was using a new fuel formulation that had been tested on the ground. In January, Spaceship Two reached 71,000 feet, its highest altitude so far. Virgin Galactic has done its testing for the spacecraft at Mojave Air and Spaceport, about 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles. That's Los Angeles, for those of you who aren't Bugs Bunny fans. On Tuesday night, an unmanned rocket exploded just seconds after liftoff from a Virginia launch pad. The $200 million rocket owned by Orbital Sciences was carrying supplies to the space station, the International Space Station. No one was injured in that explosion. So it just wasn't a very good thing for private spaceflight all the way around this week. Virgin Galactic's plans have been repeatedly delayed. Branson said earlier this month at a celebration in Mojave that it was on the verge of going to space, but he did not give a time frame. Wisely, as it turned out. Branson said on Friday via Twitter that he was on his way to California to be with the Virgin Galactic team. Stuart Witt, CEO and general manager of Mojave Space and Airport, said he did not see an explosion after the testing team realized there was an anomaly a couple of minutes after the spaceship separated from the White Knight II carrier. From my eyes and ears, I detected nothing that appeared abnormal, he said. If there was a huge explosion, I didn't hear it. He said a 90-second pause led him to think something had gone wrong. It's when I wasn't hearing anything that I became concerned, he said. Now, Virgin Galactic's reusable Spaceship Two rocket plane was designed to fly with the White Knight II carrier aircraft to 50,000 feet, where the spaceship separates and blasts off. Virgin Galactic has said that when the rocket motor engages, it will power the spaceship to nearly 2,500 miles per hour, or approximately Mach 5, and take the pilot and up to 6 passengers to the edge of space more than 60 miles above the Earth's surface, which, for those of you in Malaga, Washington, that is, no, wait a minute, that's 317,000 feet above Earth's surface. Passengers would experience weightlessness, or microgravity, if you prefer, at the suborbital altitude and see the curvature of the Earth. The spaceship would re-enter the atmosphere and glide back to a runway. The company planned to charge $250,000 for the experience. NASA said it sent its snickering condolences to Virgin Galactic on Friday afternoon. Maybe that's a little cynical, but while not on a NASA mission, the pain of this tragedy will be felt by all the men and women who have devoted their lives to exploration, a statement said. Written statement, probably. Spaceflight is incredibly difficult, and we commend the passion of all in the space community who take on risk to push the boundaries of human achievement. But, what else here? Oh, no, that was, all right. I'm not. I'm not saying that that NASA officials were snickering, but I would be willing to bet that they weren't entirely, if you'll pardon the expression, broken up about it. Now let's see. Story number 8. IRS. Sorry about that. IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, is seizing bank accounts with no court order. Did you see this story? Came out on Monday, as a matter of fact. Now, come on, you didn't think that the extent of the Obama Stoppo's malfeasances stopped at screwing Tea Party groups on their 501c4 applications, did you? No, sirree, Bob. When the one talks about soaking the rich, he's not just being metaphorical. Here's the quote from no, that's not the link. I put the wrong link on here. But it was from, let's just say it was from the news wires. It might have been Newsmax, might have been AP. The Internal Revenue Service has been seizing money from the bank accounts of individuals and businesses with no proof of any crimes nor any charges filed. Now, the IRS claims that it will stop. But will it? Using a law, the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act of 2000, that allows the feds to seize money from suspected gangsters, drug dealers, and terrorists, the IRS has put innocent people into bankruptcy and massive debt and taken the money a military father saved from his paychecks to put his kids through college, solely by tracking the amounts that people put into their bank accounts. Interrupt quote. That would be Army Sergeant Jeff Cortazzo, who managed to save $66,000 out of his meager military pay for his daughter's college education, only to have the IRS summarily steal it and force him to spend a third of it trying to get it back from them. And then there's bi-county distributors a candy and cigarette, well, there's a red flag, a distributing company in business for over a quarter of a century, which did what every company does, made daily deposits into their bank account of over and below $10,000, which somehow, one, got the IRS's attention, and two, prompted them to rob by-county distributors of almost $500,000. I think it was $447,000, absent any criminal charges or even investigation of same. The company has gone $300,000 into debt attempting to reverse this heist. Said their attorney, Joseph Potashnik, I don't think they're really interested in anything. They just want the money. Gee, you think? And did you notice that neither of these two companies constitute rich people? But Sergeant Cortazzo is a violence freak, and Bi-County sells cigarettes and sugared products. Perhaps if Sergeant Cortazzo had been a gay florist and Bi-County distributors had been distributing broccoli and doobies, maybe they'd have been left alone. What do you think? In other words, Mr. Potashnik, yes, they want the money, but they're also interested in punishing their enemies. And they're quite obviously not letting the law or the Constitution get in the way of this larcenous crusade. Resuming quote from the news story, when no criminal activity is charged, the New York Times reports, this was reported in the New York Times. The New York Times reported this. That should be another sign of the apocalypse, frankly. The New York Times is outing the Obama IRS on stealing money from law-abiding citizens? Wow. I never thought. You ever think you'd see that day come when the New York Times would report a story like this? When no criminal activity is charged, the IRS often negotiates to return only part of the seized money. Not all of it, part of it. Leaving impoverished citizens with little option but to either accept the IRS's offer or continue a lengthy and very expensive legal battle to try and get their legitimately earned money back. Or in other words, you might end up spending more on the legal battle than the amount of the money that they seized. The problem has been growing, you might be unsurprised to find out. The Institute for Justice estimates that from just 114 seizures in 2005, so just, 9 years ago, almost a decade ago, the IRS made 639 seizures in 2012. And in only 1 out of every 5 of those cases were any criminal charges ever pursued. Under the Bank Secrecy Act, banks report transactions larger than $10,000 to federal authorities, but also report a pattern of regular smaller deposits which appear designed to get around the act. This alone can be enough to trigger a seizure, the New York Times reports, and banks filed over 700,000, quote, suspicious, close quote, reports last year. Now, end of quote. Now, the crime, my friends, is that anybody has that kind of coin to deposit independent of Barack Obama's government. Can we just be perfectly honest about this? Remember the left-wing mentality. All wealth belongs to them, and whatever stipend we're allowed to keep is the product of their paternal benevolent generosity. And if we display the ingratitude to try and take back what's rightfully ours, further punishment will be mercilessly meted out. And no, ladies and gentlemen, that is not just hyperbole. Resuming quote, Richard Weber, the chief of criminal investigations at the IRS, said in a written statement in response to the Times story, quote, "After a thorough review of our structuring cases over the last year, IRS-CI, Criminal Investigations, will no longer pursue the seizure and forfeiture of funds associated with legal source structuring cases unless there are exceptional circumstances." End of quote. Well, isn't that just special? Jazz Shaw at hotair.com made the perfect observation last weekend. If the people in charge at the IRS honestly thought that this practice was ethical and in the interest of justice, why would they immediately announce that it was being curtailed as soon as the details were dragged out into the sunlight? And if they will now focus only on money that they think is acquired illegally, what sort of money were they focusing on before? I think you know. Money, in other words, that they think was acquired immorally, Mr. Shaw. It really is that obvious. So let us now revisit the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, shall we? The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I guarantee. In fact, let me lapse into my Vince McMahon impression for a moment. I guarantee that Mr. Weber will merrily resume his plundering on behalf of his infernal majesty, King Hussein, just as soon as this kerfuffle blows over, via the discovery of a sudden elasticity in the IRS's definition of exceptional circumstances. Backyard mattress seizures will be next, ladies and gentlemen. Mark my words. Story number 7. Democrats target political speech. Now, this was Doug's follow-up column on Monday from one of the big stories last week, which was, of course, the Federal Election Commission being deadlocked between its Obama appointees and its Republican appointees on, in essence, nationalizing the Internet, or at least cracking down on political speech on the Internet. Now, I don't have time to go. See, Doug, you think I'm verbose on the air. Doug is verbose in print, so he just goes on and on and on. So I'll just give you the flavor of it, the first 2-3 paragraphs here. The desire to kill political speech on the Internet is nothing new when it comes to the liberal left Obaminist Democrats. Their goal is not to win in the arena of ideas, but to eliminate any voice that dares to speak out against them in the arena of ideas. In the battle to silence dissent online, an attack is being launched by the Federal Elections Commission, regardless of Congress, regardless of the First Amendment, which tells the federal government to keep its bloody hands off of the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the freedom of association, and regardless of state election laws and authorities, the FEC under Barack Obama is targeting the way campaigns are presented online, whether you like it or I like it or not. Now, a week ago yesterday, October 24th, probably still smarting, they'll never stop smarting from this, from losing the Citizens United court case that was argued in 2009 and decided in 2010, and decided in January of that year, as a matter of fact. And after a deadlocked 3-3 FEC vote, a key Democrat on the Federal Election Commission called for burdensome new rules on Internet-based campaigning, prompting the Republican chairman to warn that Democrats want to regulate online political sites and even news media. Democrat FEC Vice Chair Ann M. Ravel announced she plans to do what she can to make sure the FEC begins regulating Internet-based campaigns and videos currently free from most of the FEC's rules. A re-examination of the Commission's approach to the Internet and other emerging technologies is long overdue. So, on whom would this land, ladies and gentlemen? Well, you're listening to it here, for example. American Daily Review would land on Hard Starboard Radio as an example, not just us. But it would also land on politicalpistachio.com as well. Applying FEC regulations against the Internet would expand the power of the FEC, which currently, under a 2006 FEC rule, regulates only Internet videos that are placed for a fee on websites. Free political videos and advocacy sites have been free of regulation with the intention to increase voter participation in politics. Republicans argue that if the Democrats get their way on this, it would not only expand federal government power over speech, but allow the FEC to control anybody's opinions who writes a political blog, runs a politically active news site like Matt Drudge, for example, or even a chat room. Comical Internet campaigns like Obama Girl and Jib Jab would also face regulations. Personal blog sites like politicalpistachio.com are much like a person's front lawn. The real argument here is, should the federal government be allowed to tell you, if we can put a candidate's sign on our front lawn? Or lawns, as the case may be. Should they be allowed to control our political speech while we're standing on our front porches? Should they be allowed to dictate to us whether or not we can put political bumper stickers, especially for candidates, on our cars? The Internet is an extension of our own personal property. What we say and do on our own property for those that stop by and visit to see is our own business, and to try to regulate it is a direct assault on our personal freedom of political speech as individuals. And that's what they're trying to do. And here again, after this Tuesday, does anybody doubt that there's an executive order coming from the White House regarding this issue? If you do doubt it, you shouldn't. Story number 6, ladies and gentlemen. Hillary Clinton on economics. Did you hear about this week? Well, you did if you follow politicalpistachio.com and listen to the Hard Starboard Radio Network podcast Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. Now, here's the background. Hillary Clinton was at a campaign event in Massachusetts for Democrat gubernatorial candidate Martha Coakley. You might remember Martha Coakley. She was as the Democrat candidate for Ted Kennedy's U.S. Senate seat, the late Senator Edward M. Kennedy, back in early 2010, after Senator Kennedy passed away. She was the Democrat candidate in the special election to fill that Senate seat against Republican opponent Scott Brown, who, of course, is now the Republican challenger in New Hampshire to Democrat incumbent Senator Jeanne Shaheen. So that's kind of the context here. So Hillary Clinton was in Boston a week ago yesterday, campaigning for Martha Coakley, and she happened to mention in her speech, how did Howie Carr of the Boston Globe put it? She hopped right into her own personal Wayback Machine to deliver her speech to the Park Plaza, and one of the things she said was that businesses don't create jobs. Yeah, she actually said that. Businesses don't create jobs. That's just trickle-down nonsense that we've heard for years and we've heard for decades from the extreme right, and it doesn't work, and blah, 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 blah. And you know, people are, and of course, much was made about it in the rightosphere because, of course, so many people still think that Hillary Clinton is just going to be the de facto, the front runner for the presumptive 2016 Democrat nominee. I'm not one of those people. I don't think Hillary Clinton is going to be the 2016 Democrat nominee. I think her ship sailed in 2008, and even in 2008 it was too late. You know, her shelf life, arguably as a national political figure, and as presidential timber, shall we say, had already sailed. She'd already passed her expiration date in 2008. Look how 2008 turned out for her. So the notion that Hillary Clinton is the automatic Democrat presidential nominee in 2016, I don't think so, folks. Not by a long shot, as Stone Cold Steve Austin would say. And but so many people believe that that's going to be the case, and so everybody had fun with that. You know, Hillary Clinton needs an economics lesson. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Let me tell you something. First of all, Hillary Clinton has always believed this Marxist bilge. All right, she's always believed it. She was an Alinskyite before anybody knew Saul Alinsky's name. She was an Alinskyite when Barack Obama was still communizing in Chicago. All right? I mean, she is an Alinskyite of long standing. So she's always believed this Marxist bilge. I mean, she was an original disciple of Saul Alinsky. That hasn't changed, and it never will. But, see, Hillary's problem is this, and I've been writing about this on politicalpistachio.com for months, every time Hillary Clinton's in the news, practically. Here's the problem for Hillary. And this is what I wrote back in August. I just plucked one at random. No, ladies and gentlemen, this trip to the woodshed is all about two words: Elizabeth Warren. Hillary Clinton knows she cannot beat the Massachusetts communist senator for the 2016 Democrat nomination. The left hates Hillary Clinton. They cannot stand Hillary Clinton. They think she's sold out. They think she's gone corporate. They can't stand Hillary Clinton. And they love Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren. That's the context for this, folks. See, Hillary knows that Obama Nation hates La Clinton Nostra in general, and she knows that Barack Obama specifically favors Senator Warren over her upside-down legs. Hillary's, that is. And she knows damn good and well that as rich as Clinton Incorporated is, she is overmatched financially against any Obama-backed candidate. Pocahontas is Hillary circa 1994. All the undiminished radicalism, none of the corporate Wall Street taint, and philandering husband baggage, and all the other compromises she's had to make over the past 22 years. Or, to invoke the obvious 2004 parallel I've used on many an occasion, Hillary Clinton is John Kerry, and Elizabeth Warren is Howard Dean. 10 years ago, the Democrat base barely rejected their heart, Howard Dean, for their brain, John Kerry, and what did it get them? Never mind that the true answer to that question was 10 percentage points closer to George W. Bush than Howard Dean would have scored. Besides, after Obama, the nutroots think they're invincible. And they will be once their demigod decrees himself a lifetime term. Political immortality certainly won't come from the Liz. But Elizabeth Warren will come a lot closer than Mrs. Clinton ever will, assuming Barack Obama allows a 2016 election, which is why Hillary Clinton must bow, curtsy, genuflect, and otherwise humiliate herself by rolling out the prayer rug at Martha's Vineyard. And this was back in August. Remember when she had her woodshed session with Barack Obama after she started criticizing his ISIS policy? And the best part is it's a futile endeavor, and everybody, most especially Mrs. Clinton, knows it. Now, that's what I wrote back in early August. See, Hillary Clinton wants to be president. President of the United States. I always have trouble with that word. President of the United States. So bad she can taste it. So bad that we can taste it. It's the biggest loose end, the biggest unrequited dream, the biggest unfinished business in her whole entire miserable life. And she just can't let go of it. So she burbles and spews communist bromides like businesses don't create jobs in the forlorn hope that she can somehow get to Senator Warren's left and finally get that run at the proverbial brass ring. What she does not understand, what she's incapable of understanding, is that she's got the mere equivalent problem Mitt Romney had when addressing the GOP's Tea Party grassroots a couple of years ago. She no longer speaks the language of the left. Her accent is off. She can't get the hang of the... She and her $250,000 speech overhang chirping Trotskyite homages like capitalism has been tried, that has failed rather spectacularly, sound about as convincing as the time fold into that general store in Ohio and drawled, "I wants me a hunting rifle." It's self-parody. It's the epitome of pathos. And it would make me almost pity one quark and glue on for being, which is Roslyn, so gosh darn entertaining. Assuming, of course, that Barack Obama ever vacates the office she so desperately seeks. Let's see. I lost count here. That was story number 6. So story number 5, Islam and American school lessons. At a grade school in Tennessee, where a handout by a Tennessee grade school teacher called the Founding Fathers racists, and this handout was supplied by the Nation of Islam, conveniently enough. It's got a picture of Mount Rushmore, and it's got a Nation of Islam propaganda under each founding father. So George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, Lincoln. Card is compulsive for lefties. Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Barack Obama play it all the time because they know not how to do anything else. Even though it's been so overdone after 6 plus years, that any and all pejorative impact it may once have had has long since been expended. Now it's just tiresome, bigoted, sneering noise at worst. But guess what? A public school in Tennessee is teaching its students to be good little left-wing racists and Ameriphobes, claiming the Founding Fathers were all racists, i.e. more psychological projection. The imparter in question is teaching this garbage by means of a handbook from the Nation of Islam. Here's a quote from FoxNews.com. The mother of an 8-year-old child wants to know why a Tennessee school teacher gave her child a handout from the Nation of Islam that portrayed the presidents on Mount Rushmore as being racists. Sommer Bauer tells Fox News, her son was given the Nation of Islam handout at Harold McCormick Elementary School in Elizabethton, Tennessee. The handout asked, "What does it take to be on Mount Rushmore?" The handout then explains that George Washington hailed from Virginia, a prime breeder of black people, even though he emancipated his own slaves, if you recall your actual American history. Of Theodore Roosevelt, it was alleged he called Africans ape-like. There were also disparaging remarks made of Thomas Jefferson, that he enslaved 200 Africans, and, of course, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator. And even he isn't spared this vicious racist demonization. Concluded PatriotAction.net's Bill Bissell, quote, "The mother of the student who saw the handbook had given to her by her son isn't taking this sitting down. The superintendent looked alarmed at the handbook, wondering why it was even in the school. But the alarm has already been sounded." Now, I don't know whether the superintendent was genuinely alarmed or whether he was feigning, concurrence with the angry mother, just in the interest of trying to keep a lid on this. But at the very least, it looks like this teacher was freelancing. It's funny how public school teachers seem to be prone to this kind of freelancing. Then it comes out, and an angry parent tells it to the news, and it becomes a national story, and then they always retreat. Have you ever noticed that? And it makes you wonder how many times something like this happens and we never hear about it. What percentage of these kinds of stories actually ever make the national news? It's a worthy question to ask, it seems to me. There is a Tennessee-based organization called Parents for Truth and Education. They do not see any connection between the handbook and Common Core, but they are now on high alert as well. The son of Sommer Bauer should be commended for letting his mom see this trash. Any of you parents may want to look into this and see if this Islamic nation garbage is being taught in your child's school as well. I heartily second that recommendation. But, come on, Mr. Bissell. What would ever give you the silly idea that smearing the Founding Fathers could ever have the remotest connection to Common Core curriculum programs, or CCCP? Clearly, Mr. Bissell is imagining things, right? In fact, I should have played this for story number 5.
Story number 5.
And now, clearly, Mr. Bissell is imagining things, right?
Story number 4.
Here we go, story number 4. It just broke late last night, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just bring up the tab here. Remember Marine Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi, the Marine who inadvertently drove into Mexico with his legally owned guns and was arrested and has been languishing in a Mexican jail ever since, and Barack Obama has not done one single damn thing, couldn't lift a single finger, couldn't wield his putter or anything to try to get Sergeant Tahmooressi sprung, released, freed from his unjust imprisonment in Mexico. Well, yesterday he was freed, ladies and gentlemen. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi is free at last. After 214 days in a Mexican prison, reports FoxNews.com, Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi crossed the U.S.-Mexican border last night boarding a private jet for Florida shortly after 9 p.m. local time after a strong diplomatic push that did not include the Obama White House appeared to help convince a judge to release the former Marine on humanitarian grounds. After reviewing the ruling, Tahmooressi family spokesman Jonathan Frank said the judge acted on a recommendation from the PGR, the Mexican Attorney General's office. In that motion, the prosecutor essentially withdrew the charges, Franks said. Moments later, the trial judge issued an acquittal in Andrew's case, calling for an immediate and absolute release. Huzzah! 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 Not to get all British on your candy asses, but Sergeant Tahmooressi release comes after a lengthy closed trial and a congressional hearing in September. A congressional hearing, which means a House hearing, in September, highly critical of Obama regime efforts, of which there were none, to secure his release and Mexico's refusal to let him go. Sergeant Tahmooressi said he made an innocent mistake the evening he crossed into Tijuana with 3 weapons in his truck on March 31st. While his defense rested its case several weeks ago, Tahmooressi release came only after a strong diplomatic push from former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson and Congressman Ed Royce, Republican of California, and Matt Salmon, Republican of Arizona. Now, of course, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson is a Democrat, so I guess you could call it bipartisan. You'll notice that no White House involvement. Speaking by phone on his way to board a plane with Tahmooressi, Bill Richardson said the trio, along with talk show host Montel Williams, who's really been flogging this for months, met with Mexico's Attorney General and Ambassador to the United States advocating for his liberation. The totality of diplomacy, the judicial process, the legal strategy, and the importance of the American-Mexican relationship resulted in Andrew's release, Richardson said. And now we have this great outcome. Andrew's coming home. So as late as last night, the family spokesman for the Tahmooressi family told Fox News the judge had not been expected to make a decision for at least another week. While the spokesman expressed optimism that there was no certainty that the judge would rule on Tahmooressi favor and could have found him guilty of firearms possession. His attorney had argued for his release based on humanitarian grounds because he has post-traumatic stress disorder, for which the last how long would it have been? 7 months has undoubtedly done so much to alleviate, right? Upon release, Mexican officials processed him quickly through immigration, Richardson said. He was happy. He was smiling. He's looking good. His spirits are high, Richardson told Fox News. Yeah, I don't wonder. Adding that Tahmooressi said he wants a steak dinner and stone crabs. Oh, yes. That sounds like hey, I had steak last night as part of my pig out. But Richardson said Tahmooressi is seeking privacy and still needs to receive treatment for a lot more than he would have otherwise for his post-traumatic stress disorder, something that wasn't available in Mexican prison. A key argument put forth by defense attorney Fernando Benitez. The 3 officials, along with Tahmooressi mother Jill, have spent the last week in Tijuana pressing officials for his release. So Sergeant Tahmooressi is finally coming home, ladies and gentlemen. That is the bottom line, but he's coming home. Absolutely no thanks to Barack Hussein Obama.
Story number 3.
Yeah, precisely, Lady Michelle in the chat room says, this couldn't possibly have anything to do with an election, could it? Yeah, that might have had something to do with it. I mean, it's possible. Who knows? Anything could happen, right? story number 3. Did you hear from any place and hear in the news recently that there's something happening on Tuesday? I know. I mean, it's been buried. It literally has been. It's not been a big deal. Hasn't received nearly the coverage that a midterm congressional election campaign typically receives. But what with Ebola and ISIS and all these other things swirling around, the 2014 midterm elections haven't really gotten a whole lot of attention, comparatively speaking. Not like they typically would have. Well, the first thing to expect to state, and I'm going to have on Monday on Hard Starboard Radio at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network, I'm going to have my final Senate election predictions. Consider this a sneak preview, this first item here. On story number 3, consider this a sneak preview, as I just mentioned. Experts are, now this is from Newsmax.com. Experts are predicting that it could be days or even months before voters know which party will take control of the Senate in January, should one or two key races be forced into a runoff, or if results are so close they require a recount. Hint, hint. Well, you know what? I fully agree with that. Nate Silver of 538.com, and like I said earlier this week on Hard Starboard Radio, Nate Silver, like it or not, is the current reigning king of political prognosticators. He got 2012 absolutely spot on correct. Every single state, every single race, certainly every single state as far as the 2012 presidential election. So Nate Silver's the guy. I don't like it any more than you do, but he is. But even Nate Silver said that in Georgia and Louisiana, the probability is high that a victory will not be called on election night if any of the candidates fail to get the required 50% support needed to claim victory. And I'll just tell you right now, no, in neither state, in neither Georgia nor Louisiana, will there be anybody that gets above 50%. Because there's a dumbass libertarian who's sucking votes away from Republican David Perdue in Georgia. And, of course, none of Mary Landrieu's elections have ever ended on election night. There's always a runoff, so you can pretty much graven that in stone. A runoff in Georgia remains more likely than not. Our model, says Nate Silver, gives Republican David Perdue about a 30% chance of winning outright on November 4th, while Democrat Michelle Nunn is down to only about a 10% chance of doing so. The rest of the time, the other 60% of the time, the race will be runoff bound, said the former New York Times statistician. Georgia's runoff would take place on January 6th. Typically, the new Congress is sworn in the first week of January. Not this time, because the Georgia's runoff, and I don't know why they're delaying it. I mean, when Saxby Chambliss was reelected to the seat in question in 2008, that ended up in a runoff, and his runoff was in early December. So I don't know why Georgia is delaying it till January 6th. And you talk about drama. What if the runoff in Georgia? What if if the Perdue Nunn race goes to a runoff in Georgia? And who controls the Senate hinges on the results of that runoff, and the runoff takes place January 6th, 3 days before the opening of the 114th Congress. You talk about high drama. And then picture this. What if that runoff is such a photo finish that they have to do a recount? We may not know who controls the Senate for we may not know for months. We may not know, literally, we may not know for months. I mean, you're sitting there with a 50, in that scenario, with a 50 to 49. Well, what would it be? What would it have to be to who? I don't even know who would hold the gavel temporarily as majority leader. I mean, no, that in that scenario it would be 50-49, 50 Republicans, 49 Democrats, right? So depending on who won between Perdue and Nunn in a runoff election recount, I mean 50-49, I suppose would mean that Mitch McConnell, assuming he's reelected, which not a guarantee, but 50-49. So Mitch McConnell would presumably temporarily be majority leader, but depending upon whether or not Michelle Nunn actually won the recount, and she's a Democrat in a recount, so of course she'd win. But if that took place, well then, at that point, Mitch McConnell would have to hand the Senate Majority leadership back to Dirty Harry Greed. You know, it's kind of reminiscent of when the last time anything like that happened was back in 2001. Remember when the late Jumping Jim Jeffords, the Vermont, I think he was Vermont senator, who switched parties from the Republicans to the Democrats in early 2001, and so Trent Lott had been majority leader, but when Jeffords jumped, he had to pass the Senate majority leadership over to then Democrat leader in the Senate, Tom Daschle. That's the last time I've seen anything like this happen. At any rate, no question, Georgia and Louisiana will go to runoffs. The ballot, let's see. Yeah, runoff very likely. And then there's also a mention here of another state. Not that there would be a runoff, but given its location, and COG should already be aware of this, that in Alaska, where the polls close at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, there is a chance that officials may not be able to call the race if the candidates come within a few points of each other. Our assumption, Nate Silver said, is that either Democrat incumbent Senator Mark Begich or GOP challenger Dan Sullivan would have to win by at least 5 percentage points for Alaska to be declared in time for the evening news on Wednesday evening, so November 5th. Silver's model says there's about a 30% chance of that happening and a 70% chance that things will take at least a bit longer, which I also agree with, for reasons I will go into more detail on Monday's edition of Hard Starboard Radio. And it'll also go public at politicalpistachio.com on midnight Tuesday morning, just so you're aware. Now, Larry Sabato predicts an avalanche of photo finishes and accompanying recounts, which is to say, you might as well declare that the Democrats are going to retain the majority of the Senate, because Democrats have not lost a recount anywhere in any race at any level since the 2000 presidential election, which was their dry run for mass voter fraud on a national scale, by the way. I also agree with that sentiment. I don't often agree with Larry Sabato, but I do on that. I do differ with Mr. Sabato on the chaos, though, that he says it will create in Washington, D.C., only because Washington, D.C. has been in chaos for going on 6 years. So it's something that we, the people, should have become comfortably acclimated to a long time ago. So there's that item on story number 3. And then, of course, voter fraud. You hear about what happened in Maryland and Illinois with their voting machines? Oh, man, you can just set your calendar. You can set your clock. You can set your watch by this. That's another Newsmax story. A number of voting machines in Maryland and Illinois are electronically switching Republican votes to the Democrats, raising suspicions that fraud could be at the root of the alleged malfunction. Oh, really? Oh, the hell you say? Couldn't possibly be true, could it? According to Watchdog.org, election officials in both states have characterized the problem as a calibration issue, but a software developer and expert on touchscreens used by U.S. intelligence agencies told Newsmax that the explanation was crap. Well, he said bogus, but I say crap. It's a software issue, and it's incredibly suspicious that a bug like that could slip through accidentally. Defies belief, said the software expert Tony Heller. I trust no comments necessary at this point. He said that any expert trained in the technology could figure out within minutes whether the problem was the software or was accidental and deliberate. This is being used by the public for voting. Public trust is essential, he said. It's completely unacceptable that an official waved it off as a calibration issue. It's something that can easily be verified and should be. Not to lapse into my... remember what was the name of the coach of the New Orleans Saints back in the 80s? Jim, I can't remember his name now. You know the Saints coach that had that classic interview where someone asked him about his team, about the Saints' chances of making the playoffs, and he said, "Playoffs? Playoffs? You're talking about playoffs?" Can't remember his name, but this reminds me of that. I mean. Public trust? Public trust? You're talking about public trust? To quote the Empress Hoshi Sato III, since when do the people matter? The people are fodder, a source of revenue to be taxed, a pool of raw material to be kept ignorant and afraid for when Barack Obama needs them to be angry and swell with pride. The people are pawns. Their best interests and their trust are irrelevant. That's the Democrats' attitude. The only thing I don't understand is why states as blue as Illinois and Maryland are rigging voting machines for the Democrats. Do they consider a GOP upset in either state to be so likely that they have to do, or that they have to so conspicuously take no chances? I would expect this sort of thing in North Carolina, where there are other shenanigans in process. Kentucky, Georgia, Arkansas, Louisiana, Iowa, Kansas, Colorado, another locale of reported funny business. Alaska, New Hampshire, etc. States with actual competitive races. Or maybe it's just congenital. Democrats breathe, eat, sleep, sneer, demonize, persecute, lie, copulate indiscriminately and promiscuously, and steal everything, including what's nailed down, as well as elections. You have to admit, there will never be any consequences for it, and the public doesn't seem to care, so why wouldn't Democrats cheat to glorious excess? The name of the game to them is winning at any cost, after all. Doug had a long piece on vote harvesting coming up next Tuesday, so you may want to go over to politicalpistachio.com. This was from he posted this last night, so you may want to help yourself to that. I had a piece here that I'm not going to have time for because I got to be sticking one of my 4 weather eyes out for Jennifer to call in, but maybe I'll finish it on Monday as part of my election preview. It's regarding Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who The Democrats have done everything humanly and even superhumanly possible to destroy and prevent him from being reelected, because if Scott Walker is reelected governor of Wisconsin after the last 4 years, after a recall attempt, after 2 bogus partisan investigations smearing him as being corrupt and engaging him in political corruption and so on and so forth, if Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker gets reelected anyway to a second term, a man with his executive experience, his Tea Party credibility, his proven, demonstrated level of both fighting the left tooth and nail and getting a lot of conservative policy accomplished, turning a $3.6 billion state budget deficit into a multi-billion-dollar surplus, cutting taxes over 40 times. If Scott Walker gets reelected on Tuesday, instant front-runner, or at least he should be the instant front-runner for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Period, exclamation point. It's something I've been talking about for the past year. Now, someone finally at American Spectator this week, who was it? Aaron Goldstein, echoed me what I've been saying for the past year. Prepare for Scott Walker 2016, assuming he gets reelected Tuesday. I'll have a prediction on that as well on Monday's edition of Hard Starboard Radio. Also wanted to just briefly mention, Charlie Crist. Remember Sorry Charlie Crist? A one-time Republican governor of Florida. He succeeded Jeb Bush from 2006 through 2010, and then he ran for the Senate as an independent in 2010 in the Marco Rubio landslide. And then he just dropped any pretense and joined the Democrats, and now he's challenging Florida Governor Rick Scott on Tuesday. Well, it came out this week that Charlie Crist has a number of strip club supporters from whom he's taken $50,000 in campaign donations, and one of them it came out. In fact, this is going to be a post of mine at politicalpistachio.com later today after the radio shows. Here it is. Crist has come under fire for refusing to return contributions to his political committee from owners of strip clubs, including a $50,000 donation from Joe Rodriguez, who, although his club was closed in 2009 for drug dealing and prostitution, was allowed to sell it and never lost his business license, according to the Sunshine State News. Yeah, so Charlie Crist. I mean, it fits that he's a Democrat, right? Accepting tens of thousands of dollars from strip club owners, including one whose establishment was closed for drug dealing and prostitution, and he will not return their contributions. Florida Republicans and the Rick Scott campaign are having a field day with that one, folks. I also have a final prediction on that race on Monday's edition of Hard Starboard Radio as well. And then, of course, Doug has in fact, maybe I'll say this I don't know if I'll have time on Constitution Radio. The Republican gubernatorial candidate, who's going to get slaughtered on Tuesday anyway by Democrat Jerry Brown, is Neil Kashkari, who is left-wing on social issues and kind of, sort of, maybe conservative on economic issues. And Doug went back and forth with an email correspondent, a fellow conservative, a tighty-righty, shall I say, about how can you support Neil Kashkari? He's for gay marriage, he's for abortion, he's for all these things. He's a rhino even to rhinos. How could you? He's not the lesser of two evils. He's just as bad as Jerry Brown. Well, I don't know. Maybe not. Doug believes that Neil Kashkari is just by a hair's breadth better than Jerry Brown, but better nonetheless. It doesn't matter because Neil Kashkari is going to get slaughtered on Tuesday anyway. What else we got here? Now, let me check the phone queue, and I see that Jennifer hasn't quite called in yet, so I could venture a little bit into stories 2 and 1 just in case. So we run short on Constitution Radio. I mean, I don't want to. I want to keep to the show schedule, but I don't want to give Waleed Shabat the bum's rush either. So, because it'll be such an honor to speak with him and interview him. But story. Yeah. No, I have those. I have those audios to hear as well.
Story number 2.
Story number 2, Ebola's political backlash. Now, of course, you may have heard about this week as well. Now, we talked last week about how, and I blogged about it at politicalpistachio.com, about how remarkable it was that New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, bet you didn't know Andrew Cuomo was on the ballot on Tuesday, announced a mandatory Ebola quarantine for anybody coming into ports of entry to their respective states. That was last weekend. And I remember thinking, I wonder how long it'll take for Barack Obama to get that squashed. Well, it took all of about, let's see, was the 26? It took all of about 48 hours. This was a New York Times story, New York Times headline, last Sunday via the Huffington Post. White House pressures states to reverse mandatory Ebola quarantine orders. Here was the lead, and I'm not even going to bother to go to the New York Times story, but the Obama regime has been pushing the governors of New York and New Jersey to reverse their decisions, ordering all medical workers returning from West Africa who had contact with Ebola patients to be quarantined, an administration official said. Well, shortly thereafter, the quarantines were lifted. And the person who was most proximately responsible for that was a nurse named Kaci Hickox. I blogged about her at politicalpistachio.com just the other day. She was from Maine, and she was over in West Africa helping to treat the Ebola epidemic over there for Doctors Without Borders. You've heard of that organization, I'm sure. Dr. Craig Spencer, who came back from West Africa, had no Ebola symptoms and claimed that he was going to house quarantine himself, but then house quarantine apparently includes riding the subway, going to multiple restaurants, going bowling, sticking his fingers in communal bowling balls, sticking his feet in rented shoes, etc., etc. And, of course, he eventually did come down with Ebola. God knows how many people in the Big Apple that he exposed to the Ebola virus. He was with Doctors Without Borders as well. Well, Kaci Hickox returned before this mandatory quarantine was lifted. She returned, flew into Newark Airport, Newark International, or whatever if it has a name, I don't remember now. But Newark's International Airport, and she had to go into mandatory quarantine, and she was not a happy camper. She bitched, she moaned, she said it was a violation of her human rights. She called it a human rights violation. Now, this is a nurse. This is somebody in the healthcare field. This is somebody who knows, supposedly, you would think, knows medicine. Now, I am not a doctor. Nor do I play one on TV. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I'll tell you this much. If I were going to West Africa to help treat Ebola patients, try to, slow down the Ebola epidemic, I would assume, I would go into it with the assumption that when my tour was over and it was time to go back to the United States, that I would be in quarantine for at least 3 weeks. I would assume this. It is such a no-brainer. You go over to West Africa, you're working with Ebola patients, you've been exposed. When it's time to go home, you go into quarantine. This is not difficult. I would keep the quarantine over in West Africa, to be quite honest with you. Nobody even returns to the country if they've been exposed to Ebola. No, not Kaci Hickox. She bitched, she moaned, she said, it's a violation of my human rights. And probably constitutional rights, too. And, of course, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. The White House seized on Nurse Hickox, and she was released. Oh, yeah, she was released, so she was allowed to go home to Maine. And then, if you recall, Maine Republican Governor Paul LePage issued an order saying, no, you got to go into mandatory quarantine if you're coming into the state. Well, guess what happened? Oh, it must have been. Yeah, guess what happened yesterday, ladies and gentlemen? A Maine judge this is from straight off the AP wire, a Maine judge gave Nurse Kaci Hickox the okay to go wherever she pleases, handing Governor LePage and state officials a defeat Friday in the nation's biggest court case yet over how to balance personal liberty, public safety, and exposure to Ebola. Well, apparently, personal liberty trumps everything. To hell with public safety and to hell with how many people get exposed to the Ebola virus. It's insane. It's retarded. Which apparently is a fair description of Judge Charles C. Laverdiere, is his name, who ruled that Hickox must continue daily monitoring of her health, but said there is no need to isolate her or restrict her movements because she has no symptoms and is therefore not contagious. That we know of. Remember the late Thomas Eric Duncan, Ebola Tom. Remember him? He wasn't showing any symptoms until he started bazooka barfing, and then he was dead I don't know if it was even a week later. And that exposed at least a couple of nurses. Remember Nurse Pham and what was the other one? Amber Vinson, who then was allowed to get on a plane to Cleveland and back. And who knows how many people she exposed? And who knows how many people Ebola Tom exposed? I mean, forget it. I mean, Ebola's here, and it's just going to burn through. Either Ebola will burn out or it'll kill us all, one of the two. And in fact, I got 10 reasons why Ebola will kill us all, or at least 70% of us. And I won't go through the whole post because it's a great big long-ass post. But suffice it to say, number one, U.S. hospitals are unprepared. 94% of American healthcare facilities, 16 out of every 17 possess neither the staff training nor the equipment to treat Ebola. And it would cost countless billions, maybe trillions, to upgrade them all. Sound Cloward Piven-esque to you? Number two, there already is airborne Ebola or dry Ebola. Now, the caveat here is that's the Ebola resistant strain, which doesn't affect human beings, but there is a dry airborne Ebola virus. Number three, Asia is screwed because basically Africa is Asia for all intents and purposes in terms of weak healthcare systems, poverty, billions in crowded conditions, etc. So aside from Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, westernized countries on the Pacific Rim, and maybe Red China's, aside from Red China's Pacific Coast token capitalist enclaves, Asia's screwed. Absolutely screwed. And remember that even the Obama CDC predicted 1.4 million cases by January in West Africa. So how difficult would it be for somebody to go from West Africa to, take your pick, India, for example? Number 5, that was number 4. Number 5, there already is airborne wet Ebola. Little droplets. It could be a sneeze. It could be a cough. Even when you're talking to somebody face to face, you're both spewing out little microscopic moisture droplets in each other's directions. So, and of course, any bodily fluid, Ebola can spread by any bodily fluid. Just like colds and flu spread. Imagine that. So, Kaci Hickox, she won't be contagious. She won't be. She doesn't have Ebola until it comes out she does. And I hope she doesn't. Don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to have Ebola. But come on, have some consideration for your fellow citizens, for your fellow townspeople, fellow neighbors, fellow countrymen, fellow Americans. Couldn't you? Number 6, the incubation period is too long. You know how Ebola's incubation period is 3 weeks? Well, there was a Drexel University study that indicated that after 3 weeks, someone who's been exposed to Ebola still has a 12% chance of developing the disease. So 3 weeks isn't long enough a quarantine, for all intents and purposes. Number 7, medical personnel have been infected despite protective equipment, which means they don't have protective equipment. Remember, 94% of U.S. hospitals aren't prepared. Number 8, the Ebola virus can live for up to 50 days on certain surfaces, wet or dry, depending on the temperature. So 50 days. Now, the CDC claims, for a few hours at most. Isn't a few hours long enough for someone to come along and touch that surface? Or is it just me? Isn't that enough to spread this disease like wildfire? And oh, by the way, as with every virus known to medical science, Ebola is incurable and there is no known treatment. Which leads to the question, does Barack Obama want America to be Ebolaized? Or Ebola-ized? Pronounce it. I want to leave out a syllable. Now, is that crazy? Is that paranoid? I'm just asking questions, folks. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. Why is Barack Obama absolutely hell-bent on not banning travel to and from West Africa to the United States? Why? In fact, it's not just that. Obama is looking at bringing foreign Ebola patients here to the United States for treatment. He's looking to deliberately import Ebola to the United States. Remember that? Remember I mentioned mere moments ago that only 6% of Americans healthcare facilities, hospitals are equipped to treat Ebola, and there is no treatment, there is no cure, like there isn't for any virus. Why is he doing this, folks? I mean, it seems an entirely reasonable question to me. Hold on a second. Story number one will have to wait for hour number 3 of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza on AM 1050 KCAA, KCAAradio.com for Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello there. I think all of your questions, I think that's a very valid question about him. Why else would he be allowing it in if he didn't want it here?
I mean, it just seems to
but
me.
Why?
I mean, I know political correctness. I know that blind guide zealotry, lefties never abandoned. They never deviate from their ideology. I mean, they demand that reality conform to their beliefs rather than. I understand, but even that just doesn't seem to quite be enough.
No, there just doesn't seem to. I can't think of a good reason. I mean, why you would want to infect your fellow countrymen, which is what it. I mean, what other conclusion can you come to? Well, I mean, I don't think he's that stupid. I really don't.
Well, I mean, it's like he's made a point of, like he hugged Nurse Pham, one of the two nurses in Houston from Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital that had been exposed to Ebola. But you have to remember, that's after she had already been declared Ebola free.
Right.
That's so yeah, big risk taker.
I'm so surprised he did it.
Oh, this should reassure everybody that Ebola is not a threat. She'd already been declared Ebola free. Let him go and hug Dr. Spencer.
What's her name? Yeah.
Let him go and
that's so irresponsible. She's a nurse. She knows better.
I mean, I have to wonder. Well, as pathetic as the Secret Service has become, I have to wonder if the Secret Service would allow him to hug Kaci Hickox.
Right. Or he wouldn't do it.
No, of course he wouldn't do it. How does it reassure anybody if the President of the United States hugs somebody who has already been declared Ebola free?
Well, if they're so sure she's, if the judge thinks she's Ebola free, let him hug her.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Let's see, Heather. If you're that sure, show us. Well, of course they won't. Liberals never put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, Lady Michelle mentions
your money where their mouth is.
Lady Michelle mentions in the chat room he only hugged her so a picture could be taken of him doing so.
He's actually right.
You couldn't say that. Imagine if Ebola had come here when Bill Clinton was president. That would have been a
my gosh.
That would have been a whole other You talk about Ebola. You couldn't even talk about bodily fluids without
this whole thing is crazy. And the fact that he wants to bring them here is amazing to me. It's one of those things that makes you shake your head and think, oh my gosh, 2 more years of this crap.
It's insane. It's sheer absolute insanity. Even Wayne Allen Root. You've seen his internet videos. He declared. He just came out and declared this week. Now Wayne Allen Root is not an optimist. Wayne Allen Root is even a bigger Eeyore than I am. And yummy fossils. Well, his YouTube video this week, he declared Ebola has destroyed the Democrat Party.
Wow.
Ebola has destroyed the Democrat Party because, I mean,
they can't blame this one on Bush. Now, come on. Not that they won't try.
I mean, well, they tried to say that. Because Barack Obama's doing more to try to cure Ebola in West Africa than George W. Bush did with AIDS, even though he spent billions doing it.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he went overboard with that, but
I mean, there just comes. For those of you in Malaga, Washington, there's something called Occam's razor. Mm-hmm. It's a logical principle. It says the simplest explanation that fits all the facts is usually the correct one.
Right.
And that's all you and I are doing, Jen. We're and Lady Michelle and Cog in the chat room and everybody else and our vast hordes of ADR Nation. That's all we're doing. We're applying Occam's razor. We're asking questions. Why is Barack Obama hell-bent to import Ebola into this country? What purpose could there possibly be? I mean, it's not. I mean, I trust me, ladies and gentlemen. I do not gain any pleasure from asking these questions, but these questions have to be asked. I mean, it's simple logic.
There are, he's done other insane things, but you can, like the pouring of illegals across the border. We know why he's doing that. A lot of the insanity we understand. This one has no explanation. I don't see the upside. I just don't get it.
Well, there's no upside for congressional Democrats on Tuesday.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's almost like he wants them to lose. I mean, all the crap that's going on, one thing after another, which that doesn't make sense either.
Well, it's not.
One gaffe after another. Mr. Gaff Machine Joe Biden, he's really been on a roll.
Well, it's not as though he needs Congress. So I mean, yeah. I personally don't think that he cares what happens to the Senate.
That's obvious.
Because I mean, remember last week? I think it was last week, sometime last week, when I forget with whom the interview was, but he said that of congressional Democrats that they support me. They're with me on all my policies. There's no separation between. It's not the verbatim quote, but there's no.
Just feel him cringing when he said that.
It's like, gee, thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
It's just lovely. I mean, there's only one candidate in the entire country that was willing to be seen on stage with him, and that was Democrat gubernatorial candidate Anthony Brown.
Is that the one that dropped like 8 points?
I don't know. I didn't check that. I know
one
that
of them dropped like 7 or 8 points in the polls. The day after he appeared with them, but I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, I don't know if that was Anthony Brown or not. I know that was the rally at which, as soon as Barack Obama got up to speak, about at least a quarter of the audience got up and left.
That had to hurt.
and this was a Democrat rally.
Yeah, they're holding Democrat signs and walking away. I saw that.
And a quarter of the audience gets up and leaves, and those that remained, I mean, there were catcalls and heckling, and so I mean,
I know it's pretty sad. Hopefully a lot of these people that call themselves Democrats, when they get in the voting booth, they'll have a little sense and not vote for. I question the veracity of anybody still calling themselves a Democrat. Why would you do that?
Well, and the more likely outcome is that they just won't show up. Yeah,
well, that's fine.
Supposedly, early voting in Colorado is absolutely overpoweringly Republican. So whether that means greater enthusiasm or whether that means the Democrats just aren't going to show up, I mean, we'll see. But
yeah, I hate to get my hopes up, but I keep seeing these. It's going to be historic losses, and for them.
Well,
and,
don't get your hopes up.
Yes, I know. I've been knocked down enough times. I'm just going to.
We didn't learn that. Didn't learn that lesson 2 years ago. Then
yes.
I don't know any other way to admit.
I still haven't gotten over that. I couldn't believe that after 4 years of him, how that could happen.
Yeah, but I'll put this caveat out there for all of y'all. If the Republicans retake the Senate, that will be the biggest liberation of Barack Obama that he could ever experience. He will feel liberated to be what he is. I mean, you know how we've talked from time to time about how the mask is less and less on Barack Obama.
Right.
It'll be gone. There'll be the Republican Senate. That will be his green light. you're going to see an avalanche of tyrannical executive decrees. Amnesty will just be the first.
Can that be stopped? I mean, how can that be stopped? Is there a way that...
Well, constitutionally speaking, I mean, there's impeachment and there's defunding, but I've been saying this for I don't know how long. How do you use the law to stop a lawless president?
Yeah, that's true.
It's just that simple.
There's got to be, I mean, he's just one man, though. There's got to be something.
One man with all the power. Time to plug yourself, Jen.
Oh, yeah. Jen's Gyrations at blogspot.com.
All right. I got to get going because I got to host Constitution Radio on AM 1050, KCAA, KCAAradio.com. Come on over, join us, folks.
Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, followed at 3 by an encore presentation of The Dave Levine Show on the station that leaves no listener behind, AM 1050 KCAA. Listen or watch online at kcaaradio.com.
From the KCAA Weather Center, I'm Rod Tanner. Well, this afternoon, Unity mostly cloudy. Our high 65 as winds gust to 20 miles an hour. There's a chance of a shower overnight. Unity mostly cloudy, low 49. Sunday should be mostly sunny. Our high 69 as winds gust to 20 miles an hour. It'll be clear Sunday night with a low of 48. We'll have a sunny, warmer Monday with a high of 74. Monday night looks clear with a low of 53. It'll be sunny and warmer on Tuesday with a high near 80. Again this afternoon, Unity mostly cloudy with a high of 65 with winds to 20 miles an hour. That's your weather forecast for this hour from the station that leaves no listener behind, NBC News Radio, AM 1050 KCAA.
This is Mia Mocha with your KCAA Community Calendar. Orange Empire Railway Museum presents Thomas the Tank Engine on November 8th, 9th, 11th, 15th, and 16th. It's a day out with Thomas. Children and grown-ups can take a 25-minute ride with Thomas the Tank Engine, have their picture taken. There'll be story time with Thomas and friends, video viewing, an imagination station, petting zoo, and more. But it doesn't stop there. On December 6th, 7th, 13th, 14th, 20th, and 21st, you can come board the train for a trip to Santa's workshop. Children can visit Santa, enjoy crafts, and other activities. For more information, call 951-943-3020 or log on to www.oerm.org. And that's a look at your KCAA Community Calendar.
Thank you, Inland Empire, for listening to KCAA Radio.
Welcome to Isla Earth. Not to bug you with extra noise, but a rainforest katydid is like you and me in one way. It's the one bug we know of that hears with a mammal-like 3-stage sound sensing system. Researchers at the University of Bristol in England say a species of katydid in the rainforests of South America hears in the way we do. When mammals hear sound, airborne pressure waves thump against their eardrums, which sends ripples through liquid-filled chambers where tuned cells pick up various frequencies. Then the trio of tiny bones, hammer, anvil, and stirrup, jiggle liquid and trigger signals to the brain via the auditory nerve. Katydids don't have ear bones. Instead, their eardrums do the translating themselves. Katydid's ears sit below their knees with drums on each side of the legs. An airborne pressure wave bends a large zone on each eardrum inward, forcing small plates on each drum to rise outward. The plate vibration sends sloshes through a liquid-filled chamber inside the leg, where detector cells sense various frequencies. So, what does that mean to us humans? Consider a miniature hearing device the size of a grain of rice, inspired by Mother Nature. Learn more at islaearth.org. Isla Earth is recorded on the campus of California State University, San Bernardino, and produced by the Catalina Island Conservancy, because Earth is an island.
Fontana needs good leadership. Now with over 200,000 people in Fontana, Fontana is San Bernardino County's second most populous city, and the 14th most populous city in the state. Fontana needs good leaders like Michael Tahmooressi to help lead the Fontana City Council. As a former trustee of the San Bernardino County Board of Education, Tahmooressi has a proven track record in the last 4 years as a Fontana City Council member. Tahmooressi holds a master's degree in business management and is a successful businessman. Michael Tahmooressi is committed to keeping Fontana moving forward through a balanced budget, accountability, and more transparency in government. Tahmooressi will work to build a quality of life in Fontana for everyone. Keep Fontana moving forward. Vote for Tahmooressi, a proven leader. On November 4th, vote Michael Tahmooressi for Fontana City Council. For more info, log on to tahmooresforfontana.com. That's Tahmooressi, the number 4, fontana.com.
Paid for by Michael Tahmooressi for Fontana City Council 2014.
Hi, this is Bob with Real Estate Talk with Bob and Randy. Tune in every Thursday afternoon from 3 until 4 at KCAA Radio 1050, and we will be there to answer your real estate questions, the latest real estate news, and to talk to the leaders of the real estate industry. Our Real Estate Talk, you can find out how to stop your foreclosure, first-time homebuyer information, loan modifications, different kinds of loans you can buy with, short sale strategies, and real estate investing and more. So don't forget, tune in every Thursday afternoon at 3 for Real Estate Talk with Bob and Randy. You'll be glad you did.
Broadcasting more local radio programs than any other station in California. We are KCAA.
Constitution Radio is on the air, ladies and gentlemen, but it's Constitution Radio with Jasmius. Not with Douglas V. Gibbs. Doug is at an undisclosed location for an undisclosed purpose, and I have been sworn to secrecy. So he is away today, so I am sitting in the center seat of the Starship Pistachio for what I refer to as not just Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, but the third hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza that begins at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review with the featured American Daily Review podcast that I just got through concluding, where, by the way, I went through stories 9 through 2, the big stories of the week, so you might want to go over there after the program concludes today on AM 1050 KCAA, KCAAradio.com, the Inland Talk Express, when no listener is left behind. Guest call-in number, 888-909-1050. And if you want to call in, but just to listen, 832-999. 1050, ladies and gentlemen. And, of course, Alex Ferguson is in the studio. Good afternoon to you, Alex. How are you doing?
Howdy there, you whippersnapper.
Yeah. See, I am still the youngling. Even though yesterday I turned 50 years of age, I am still the youngling. I bow to my more experienced senior opponent. Not opponent. No, not opponent. Friend, colleague. What am I talking about? What was that?
I just dragged my mic over. I may have had to, because of the new lineup, I've had to switch equipment.
Oh, okay. It almost sounded like Darth Vader was on the line. Yeah, I heard this.
Did you know that Darth Vader married Ella Fitzgerald? Yeah, they had a baby named Elevator.
Oh, all right. That is the most unique non sequitur I think I've ever heard, actually. But,
well, I make it a habit to collect jokes, so if you've got any, you should send them on.
Well, one thing that's not a joking matter, and Doug wanted me to start with this today and actually read to you all what he posted at politicalpistachio.com because, and in fact, here's his headline: Lab results are in. Former Murrieta, California Mayor Alan Long charged with felony DUI. Now, how stupid, this is Doug's words here, how stupid do you have to be to get behind the wheel of a vehicle with your belly full of alcohol, especially if you're a first responder sitting on top of the world as mayor of a California city, happily married with things going so well in your life? My, how quickly life can come crashing down.
My local newspaper said that he passed the chemical test, but he flunked the sobriety test, the field sobriety test. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, that apparently appears to be the case here. It came all crashing down with one stupid little error in judgment, one betrayal of the public trust. Despite knowing better as a firefighter, and Alan Long's life could become something he never thought was possible. The toxicology results have come in, and it turns out that those who were defending former Murrieta Mayor Alan Long, saying his blood alcohol level was below the legal limit, were in error. Oh. Their opinion was based on the preliminary results from a breathalyzer at the site of the accident, during which Long's blood alcohol level was registered at 0.07, and after which he failed the field sobriety test, like you were referring to there, Alex.
No wonder I'm boycotting the Whittier Daily News. They always get it wrong.
Well, they got it wrong here, certainly. The tests regarding his blood alcohol level, referring to former Mayor Alan Long, the night that Long slammed into the rear of a car full of teenage cheerleaders, say he was actually at 0.08, which means, according to the law, Long is presumed to be impaired. As a result, on Halloween last night, Halloween 2014, Long was formally charged with a felony DUI and faces 4 charges of causing bodily injury that could add to his sentence if he were to be convicted, as the charges specify. The potential penalty could be as long as 9 years in prison. His arraignment is scheduled for December 11th, over a month after the election that he refused to withdraw from after he resigned as mayor of Murrieta. So,
this is what you call a damn shame. It's not a tragedy, but it's just a damn shame for everybody around. So I said last week, and that's what I think this week. But for the grace of God, certainly I can think of mistakes that I've made that were at least as grave as that, but I didn't run into anybody.
Precisely. I mean, I talked about a couple of weeks ago here on KCAA about how now first of all, I'm a teetotaler, so I've never imbibed alcohol ever. But there was one time back in 2002 when through a freak happenstance, the rental car that I was driving, I lost control of it. It went off the road into an inter-highway median that happened to have a hedge that blocked, stopped my forward progress. And if it hadn't been for that, I would have shot out into oncoming traffic. And who knows who I could have injured. And I wasn't impaired. I just accidentally lost control of the vehicle. In this case, I mean, it's not, like I said 2 weeks ago, it's not the teenage girls in question that have had their lives changed, certainly the one that's still in the hospital with a neck injury. But now life has changed permanently for Alan Long. And like I say, let's keep him in our prayers, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep him in our prayers. His family, him, and of course the 4 teenage girls in question and their families. It's a shame. It's a crying shame.
I quit drinking 30 years ago. I went to the VA, and the counselor says, it sounds to me like you're saying that you want me to tell you to stop. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. And he says, then stop. And so I stopped. So I've got I've got a belief that if the people that make all these campaigns, the celebrities and stuff, if they would just once turn around and tell the public that alcohol is poison, it's demon rum, it ruins people, we could solve a lot of tragedy, but they don't care.
Well, it's amazing how just natural priorities in our culture have changed. That once you get into office and once you get, I don't know, I don't want to use a drug analogy, but once you get hooked on power, even at the local level, it's kind of hard to let go of. But as is always the case on Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, we're got to move right along to our guest this week. And I must say, first of all, it's my profound honor to have the privilege of being in the center seat of the Starship Pistachio on this particular occasion for this particular guest. I'm sure our listeners have heard of him and read what he writes, what he has to say. And I must say that the category of ex-jihadists that are actually still living is a very, very small club. I'm speaking, of course, of numerous times previous guest Waleed Shoebat, who is our guest today on Constitution Radio. Welcome, Mr. Shoebat.
Thank you for having me.
This is one of those occasions when when you sit and think, well, if I could interview, in this case, Waleed Shoebat, how do I start composing the questions? And of course, we do have the obligatory time constraints. But first, I want to start out with: did Barack Obama make the rise of the Islamic State, ISIS? I refuse to call them ISIL, by the way. Did he make the rise of ISIS inevitable?
Well, we could say that emphatically he facilitated in the rise of not just only ISIS, but all Islamist movements in the Middle East, even in the West. When Obama did his historic speech in Cairo, he insisted that the Muslim Brotherhood be present. When the Arab Spring began, he was right behind it and was for it. And when the Egyptians finally said, no, we don't want the Muslim Brotherhood, he continued to insist that we treat Mohammed Morsi well and that that the Egyptians basically let him loose and everything. So if we look at Obama's track record, he's been very much, pro the revolution in the Middle East. And that was basically the earthquake fault that started the whole thing. Before Reagan, during Reagan era, he called for the dismantlement of the Soviet Union. That was an earthquake that had its positive and it had its negative connotations, in which that earthquake fault basically facilitated for states like, even if you look at southern Russia, the stands, if you will, they began to kind of look at Islamism as well. And there's a unity today going on as we speak between Turkey and some of these states. And so Islam found basically a method, a way, a breather, if you will, from the secular governments that was basically holding at bay the rise of Islamist movements. Those were secular governments. Those were Hosni Mubarak. Those were Zayn al-Abidin of Tunisia. Those were the King of Morocco. He's still there, but that's also in check if and when Libya transfers to Algeria, North Africa, all of it is under threat. And so Obama's basically support for revolutionary methods, and especially Libya, in supporting the Libyan revolution, and establishing there really a rise of Islamic utopia, in which we see the situation in Libya as well as Tunisia. Now we have this Muslim Brotherhood basically ruling in Tunisia.
What are we to take away from the fact that he didn't back the people that tried to overthrow the Iranian regime?
Well, that's also during Carter era. I remember I was in the States at that time, and seeing the first Islamic revolution was in Iran. We have to always go back there.
But
Shah Pahlavi of Iran asked for help, and what did Carter do? Throw him under the bus. Hosni Mubarak, we threw him under the bus. It really undermines all the United States friends, all the friends who were friends for the U.S. It gives a message. What Obama did is send a message to all governments in the Middle East that you cannot trust the Americans. When Bush was in power, you can say 50% of Egyptians hated us because they were Muslim Brotherhood. And when Obama came, he was supposedly going to reverse the Bush era and basically reach out to the Egyptians. Now, how many Egyptians love the U.S.? Well, you have to say 50% is Muslim Brotherhood. They'll hate us anyway. But what about the secular Egyptians? With the way Obama was treating Egypt, 99.99% of Egyptians hate Americans. So how did Obama's attempts to thwart what Bush era did really help? It reversed everything.
Well, what I was referring to was in his first administration, the Iranians rose up against a crooked election, and they begged America to do something.
Oh, yes.
He never even lifted a finger.
The Green Revolution,
Absolutely. And those guys were really pro-America. Those guys were really pro-West. The students, the youth, everything. They were begging for help.
We had credible reports of young Iranians who were captured in the streets who were raped to death. And Obama said nothing.
He just sat back and let it happen,
Yes, which brings really the question. The question is, many people ask me this question. They say, well, is it really just putting Obama aside, the entire, House, the entire liberal movement in America, is it really naive or is it really something else? And my answer is always, it's something else. It's not naivete. It's really agreement. We have to understand that they don't have Judeo-Christian ethics. They are really anti-Judeo-Christian ethics. You take someone like Al Gore, with his environmentalism. He compliments Islam because Islam is an environmentalist religion, according to Al Gore.
And he sold his TV station to Al Jazeera.
Correct. Islam, according to Al Gore, believes in what is called al-ishtirakiyya al-islamiyya, Islamic socialism.
They have the same enemies, basically.
Exactly.
When we come back from this commercial break, the question will be, what about the lone wolves? Are they really alone, or is it all connected? We'll be right back with Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Jasmine is sitting in for Douglas V. Gibbs.
KCAA. What's your constitutional IQ? Your quest to learn the Constitution can be fun for the whole family. Learn about the Constitution as you play the Constitution Quest board game. Learn more at constitutionquest.com.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Tired of the lies? Come here for the truth. Douglas V. Gibbs on KCAA 1050 AM.
The true patriots of All-Star Collision have been proudly serving the Inland Empire for over 20 years. Built on honesty, integrity, quality, and old-fashioned customer service, we offer lifetime warranties for our work, and every vehicle serviced by All-Star Collision is washed, detailed, the headlights polished, fluids are checked and topped off, safety checked, and returned in showroom condition. We offer free estimates, are approved by major insurance companies, and accept all claims for all cars and trucks. We use computerized frame straightening to factory specifications, offer fiberglass body repair and paint, free local pickup and delivery, and after-hours towing. Mention this radio program at drop-off and receive $100 off or a free rental car for up to 5 days during your repair. Visit us at allstarci.com or at 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Call us at 951-279-9161. We are the kings of wreck and roll.
A journey of 1,000 words begins here at AM 1050 KCAA.
Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Jasmine is sitting in the center seat of the Starship Pistachio on this Saturday, November the 1st, 2014. Just 3 days before a midterm election you may have heard about. And now Alex wanted to make a point, and it came to my mind, too, right before the break, about the effect on Muammar Gaddafi of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, a lot of people like to keep sawing on how we didn't get any weapons of mass destruction and winning in Iraq was pointless and all this. If you go back and look, you find that Muammar Gaddafi, who was not a nice man, but he looked at that operation in Iraq and he says, I don't want any of that pie. So he turned around and handed over his entire nuclear program to America that we didn't even know he had. His teeth had been pulled between Reagan and Bush. He learned that you don't mess with America, and he was willing to work with us. And that is what I believe that's why Obama worked so hard to get rid of him. They not only they kill him, they stuck a sword up his butt.
Basically,
yes, it's a very good point. You know, those guys you don't touch have always, years ago, been against touching any of these guys because they can be easily maintained. Syria, Egypt can easily be maintained by Israel. They've taken care of them in the past during the Yom Kippur era and so on and so forth. You know, if Syria tries to do some weapons of mass destruction, Israel takes care of it. They go in there with Air Force. Everything was very well maintained. Reagan even one time sent the Air Force and, you know, shot a couple rockets. And even the daughter of Muammar Gaddafi, adopted daughter, was killed in that process, and he basically was tamed. Now that the cat is out of the box, even Saddam Hussein, I was against the war, even though many of my compatriots were for the war that, wanted to oust Saddam Hussein. I was against it. I was right. They were all wrong, because I always said that if you remove Saddam Hussein, really, Iraq will become a chaos. And indeed, it is a chaos right now. Those are the pegs, the power pegs, the Ba'athist and the secularist who really wanted to keep their power. You know, they wanted to keep their heinies in that seat of power, and they'll do anything, and especially maintaining and killing, if they have to, all Islamists. You look at Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad. He annihilated an entire city at one time. 10,000, 20,000. In one day, boom, that's it, gone. Silenced them to oblivion. That's how it works in the Middle East. We keep talking about a democratic Middle East. Well, democracy is something that is designed for the West. It's not designed for the Middle East. There is one man, one vote once in the Middle East. We've seen it. We've seen the purple thumbs in Iraq. We've seen the catastrophe and the chaos. Now the cat is out of the box. The question is, how do we go from here? There's no way to go. They got ISIS. Obama pulled out of Iraq. We have ISIS. ISIS came as an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, small group in Iraq. They started as Al-Qaeda in Arabia and Iraq, and now we have ISIS. It is born from Al-Qaeda, and now it's a major, major problem. And if you defeat ISIS, now what happens?
Well, Obama's strategy is to let them win.
That led to my another question I had on the list here. Is Barack Obama waging a phony war against the Islamic State just for public consumption, or is he actually trying to kind of sort of slow down their advance?
I've never bought into the naivety. I've always bought into agreement. Obama does somewhat agree that he wants the removal of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Now, everybody knows if you remove Bashar al-Assad in Syria, it's the same result as in Iraq. It's the same result as in Tunisia. It's the same result as what happened in Egypt. We know that. Everybody knows that. A kindergartner knows that. Why then insist on the removal of Bashar al-Assad? Why then support the Free Syrian Army, which says, give us weapons now, we will kill Bashar al-Assad, we will establish a caliphate later, versus ISIS, which wants to establish a caliphate now, which it did, and wants to kill us later. It doesn't matter. So we're really supporting Islamist jihadists. You look at the demonstrations in Syria, they're all now most of them, 40 demonstrations in the last month.
Well, yeah, the Free Syrian Army signed a non-aggression pact with the Islamic State last month.
There you go. And so
I mean,
they side with a winner, but the point is that the Kurds were the army that Obama claimed he was looking for to be boots on the ground, and instead of supporting them, they don't even have helmets.
Yeah, the Peshmerga army. Yeah, they're trying to save the town of Kobani, on the border with Turkey. And I thought it was very interesting that remember those 49 Turkish nationals that ISIS was holding, and they miraculously got released with no strings attached. I always thought there was a quid pro quo going on there.
Well, you got to look at what Obama, same thing, just a little BS difference. You got to look at what Obama does rather than what he says, because what he does is always supporting our enemies in some method or another. He's a fellow traveler.
Absolutely. I mean, take a look at the situation of ISIS. I mean, ISIS was born out of Turkey, really. Turkey is the mother of ISIS. Turkey have supported ISIS. They've taken care of their injured. They're standing by like a mother eagle, watching as the Kurds are being slaughtered in Kobani, and does nothing about it. So we need to understand that there's a big picture here. The big picture isn't really ISIS. The big picture is Turkey. Turkey wants to make sure that borders are removed, because in the Turkish view, or in Erdogan's view, and Davutoglu's view, this has been in their writings and in their speeches, that they want really a super state in the region. And so ISIS is doing its job, and that is to dismantle all borders, to basically finish the Syrian Bashar al-Assad, and to expand, because we have to look back at Erdogan. Erdogan thinks he's Salim I of the Sultan, who invaded Syria, invaded Egypt, and so on and so forth. Yeah, Rajab Tayyip Erdogan. And so, we're not looking at the big picture, and it's in NATO. Russia is in NATO. But again, the relationship between the United States and Turkey is basically becoming terrible, because again, it hurts the regime, the United States. It hurts it very much of what Turkey is doing. It's giving it a black eye, because the United States will lose the war. The airstrikes are not enough, and Turkey is not allowing them to use the Interlink airport and to use the facilities in Turkey to launch attacks on ISIS. Is going to be detrimental in that ISIS will win the war, and they are winning the war.
And Turkey, it should be pointed out, historically speaking, the last global caliphate was in Turkey. The old Ottoman Empire went away in 1923. That's what they're trying to reestablish. Turkey wants to be the capital. They want it to be their caliphate.
Well, Obama's been told by all of his military and ambassadorial advisors that what he's doing will not do the job. So what do we get from the White House? We get an anonymous statement that Netanyahu is chicken crap. I mean, how clear can it be that we're back in the same situation we were in the 30s and 40s when the Democrats sided with the Soviet Union against us, with Stalin? It's the same pattern repeating itself.
Yeah, absolutely the same. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wanted to touch on this, but since I promoted it before the last break, about the lone wolves like Michael Zehaf Bibo, who the recent convert to Islam, who invaded the Canadian Parliament building and came within a few rooms of a Conservative Party caucus where Prime Minister Stephen Harper was present. He had his machine gun, and the sergeant at arms had the temerity to actually shoot him and stop him from getting in there. And then, of course, the New York City hatchet attack by Zale Thompson, who was also another recent convert to Islam. Now, the media are calling these lone wolves. Barack Obama refuses to connect them. In fact, insists that they have not. That has nothing to do with Islam. By the way, if you've seen Zale Thompson's Facebook page, that'll give you an eyeful as to what his recent convert to Islam, how pious it really is. But
you can tell that Obama is lying because his lips are moving.
Yeah, but don't forget Bergdahl.
I mean, now these aspirants to go over to Hackistan and do their thing, or do it right here at home. Is this? Do you think, Mr. Shabbat, is this all connected? Is this all driven by the same factor and by ISIS's success as a result of Barack Obama's concurrence with it?
Yes. But here's the mistake. The mistake is that, in your question, is this driven by ISIS? We keep talking about an organization, or it's becoming a state. ISIS is really becoming a state. But we always like to say Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood. But really, they're cut from the same cloth. Mm-hmm. It's the entire Islamist movement, So is it really driven by the agenda of ISIS? Absolutely. ISIS, in fact, people should read what I've written. I was the first to translate many things, especially the ISIS manifesto. What every American needs to know about ISIS' plan to kill not 1, 2, or 3, but 10 million Americans. And this manifesto basically is written from the perspective of Islamic jurisprudence. And it's not giving the military means. However, the military means are there. They captured all of this in a laptop of a Tunisian ISIS, but I was able to find all the stuff in the Arabic all over the Internet. In fact, the means to do it is also on the Internet. It's also on YouTube, in which I written several articles urging Americans to write the FBI and tell them to have YouTube stop the training manuals and all these things. But to no avail. YouTube will remove any video I make. If I criticize, let's say, homosexuality agenda in America, 5 minutes, boom, taken down. Yep. But I urged YouTube for a year to take these things down. Nothing whatsoever. Now, let's think about this manifesto. We talk about jihad, but how many Americans look at this manifesto and read it? It talks about jihad al-rada', which is repulse jihad, or jihad al-tabid, perfecting the killing methods, and how to use weapons of mass destruction. And this is not some loony bin who put this thing together. It was Mr. Fahd who gave a fatwa. He's a major Islamic theologian. Nasr al-Fahd had 26-page fatwa, which talks about mercy killing and how to slice the necks of your enemy. This is coming on the horizon here in America. We've seen a guy cut a woman's head in Oklahoma. This is not... Yeah. Yes, we've seen Bergdahl stand in the White House, give a speech to his son, and I'm your father, Bo. Don't forget that one. What's that all about, I wonder, when Bergdahl Jr. and Sr. supports the jihadi revolutions and his Facebook is littered with Americans being killed, and I was the first to translate some of the Arabic there, too. Mm-hmm. And so it's the entire Islamist movement that we have to look at, sympathizers with ISIS. They don't have to be members of ISIS, but to do sympathize with ISIS, I can guarantee you every one of those killers sympathizes with ISIS.
Precisely.
Yeah, and so, in fact, I give you quotes from this jurisprudence in Sahih Bukhari. He gives a quote. Allah wrote everything we need to know about ihsan, kindness. So if you kill, perfect your killing. And if you slaughter, perfect your slaughter. Sharpen your blade and comfort your sacrifice. They look at this as a sacrificial system. So when the guy beheads a woman, she's a sacrificial system. They sacrifice people. In fact, people should take a look at what happened in Syria. I was the first to break that news and show the videos of the slaughterhouses. I mean, you have human slaughterhouses, but Armenians were slaughtered, and hang upside down. You can see the bodies naked, hanging like meat hooks on a conveyor belt. I mean, talking about the real sickness of what's coming on the horizon in the Middle East as well as in the U.S. is absolutely something that is not being translated by our government.
Well,
why am I the one who translates all these things?
Fox News had a segment today about John Kerry and his dealings with the Iranians and how they want to come to an agreement. If we come to an agreement with the Iranians, we are lost forever. And it's my feeling that since Israel will be not supported by Obama, may be attacked by Obama. I believe it's time for Israel to since they buried the nuclear facility so deep in the bedrock, they're going to have to put in some bunker busting bombs that are tactical nuclear, and just blow the hell out of Iran's nuclear program and tell the rest of the world, don't mess with us anymore. We're not going to die just because you people think it's convenient.
Right, but that's wishful thinking. That is not going to happen. In fact, everybody who said that for the past 5 years have said, no, it's not going to happen. Iran is going to go with its nuclear program. I was right. Iran is still going with its nuclear program. And it's not only Iran. We think that Iran is the head of the snake here, but we have a problem of unifying Iran with Turkey. We've seen Hezbollah unify with Hamas in the past, even though one is Shia, Hezbollah, and one is Sunni, Hamas. They could unite. And if you look at Turkey today, that is really something that is huge, because it is the second largest army in NATO. It is already an Islamist government, and it already is looking towards Iran. It wants to unify with Iran in the future. And that unification is very easy. ISIS now hates the Shia, the killing Shia. But Turkey will basically bring peace between those factions. Why? Because Turkey is 99% Sufi Islam. Americans do not focus that Sufi Islam is the most dangerous brand of Islam, not Wahhabi Islam. Wahhabi Islam will have Shia killing Sunni galore from now till kingdom comes. But Sufi Islam, go to Hagia Sophia in Turkey and look at the Hagia Sophia, which was converted to a mosque. You could take a look at the icons. What do they say? Hassan, Hussein, Ali. Those are the icons of the Shia. Now, why would Sunnis have the icons of the Shia? Because the Sufi brand of Islam is very much, it comes from Azeri Turks as in Iranians. Iranians, 50% of Iran are what? They're not Persians, they're Azeri Turks. So we look at this basically familial link between the two, and we look at the theological link between the two. That is, Turkey doesn't mind Shia concept. It could unite Turkey and Iran under a Mahdi. They want a Mahdi. People, we used to talk about Mahdism a long time ago. They thought it was only 12th Imam or something that comes from the Shia. No. It is really the caliphate.
I think the thing to take away is that they might all be rivals with each other, but they all hate us, and that's how we're going to have to wrap it up. We're up against the clock. But Mr. Shabbat, it's been an honor and a pleasure. And go ahead and give your contact information, and then we'll wind this down.
Shubat.com. People could read my articles there, just as you spell the word shoe, S-H-O-E, and bat, B-A-T, S-H-O-E, BAT.com.
God bless you, sir.
And thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back with the big stories of the week, the Constitution Quest discussion of the week, and the book of the week, all on Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Jasmine is sitting in.
KCAA. If it weren't for the Constitution, nothing would get done. Constitution Speaker Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs on KCAA 1050 AM.
The true patriots of All-Star Collision have been proudly serving the Inland Empire for over 20 years. Built on honesty, integrity, quality, and old-fashioned customer service, we offer lifetime warranties for our work, and every vehicle serviced by All-Star Collision is washed, detailed, the headlights polished, fluids are checked and topped off, safety checked, and returned in showroom condition. We offer free estimates, are approved by major insurance companies, and accept all claims for all cars and trucks. We use computerized frame straightening to factory specifications, offer fiberglass body repair and paint, free local pickup and delivery, and after-hours towing. Mention this radio program at drop-off and receive $100 off or a free rental car for up to 5 days during your repair. Visit us at allstarci.com or at 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Call us at 951-279-9161. We are the kings of wreck and roll.
Real talk for real people, right here in the Inland Empire. We are 1050 AM, KCAA.
Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Jasmine is sitting in while Doug is otherwise disposed. Now, I want to make brief mention of the book of the week, and then that will be story number one. So, on the big stories of the week. So Alex, hold your horses. I'll just make mention of it right here. The book of the week is Stonewalled by Cheryl Atkinson, or as the White House refers to her, that unreasonable ex-CBS News reporter. It is an expose on how the Obama regime is protected, the wagon circled around it by the major media, which, of course, everybody's known that for 6 years, but she really lays out in detail just how egregious it really is. So that's the book of the week, Stonewalled by Cheryl Atkinson. Now, I want to make relatively brief mention here of the Constitution Quest discussion of the week. There's not going to be a question this week. So, Joe, you can relax. Now, I wish I could see you through, like Doug does through the studio window there, but the Constitution Quest discussion of the week has to do with express powers versus implied powers as it relates to the necessary and proper clause. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 of the United States Constitution. Now, basically, express powers is the enumerated powers that are actually in the Constitution. Because, of course, the states created the Constitution. The states granted only certain powers to the federal government through the Constitution that for actions that they couldn't do for themselves. That's the whole point of enumerated powers, express powers. Now, implied powers are what the living, breathing constitutionalists want to say exist. They're powers that are not enumerated, that are not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, but that which they want to say, well, it's implied from this, or it's implied from that. And apparently Doug got into an email exchange with a particular correspondent who was trying to say that, over express versus implied powers. And now I want to get to Doug used the necessary and proper clause to kind of illustrate this. Now, what the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, get out your constitutions, folks, is known as the necessary and proper clause. To make all laws which are necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Now, what that means basically is that necessary and proper means anything that needs to be done in order to carry out an express power. And the example is used of like building post offices. Well, obviously, building a post office is an expressed enumerated power in the United States Constitution, granted to the federal government. But if you're going to build a post office, you have to, I call it architect. You got to bring in builders to actually construct it. Now, those aren't doing so. Bringing in an architect and a construction company is not an implied power. It's necessary and proper in order to carry out the enumerated power in question. In this case, constructing post offices. It's not an implied power. An implied power is a power that is not in the Constitution, but that people who want to do something the Constitution does not permit want you to think is there. Another term is penumbra, if that rings a bell.
Abortion.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm right in the process of reading Douglas V. Gibbs' new book, The Basic Constitution, and on page 59 and 60 it says that the big crook in this thing was Alexander Hamilton. Mm-hmm. That he wanted to have, he's a statist. And he and Mr. Jefferson got into it, and as far as I can tell, all the evils that have happened to our government since are as a result of this distorted concept of the Constitution. Implied
versus express powers. I mean, that's. It's human nature. The founders understood human nature. They understood that human nature was base, that it was selfish, and then in a situation like this, with a constitution like ours that only has express powers, whose purpose is to limit the federal government, that people would want to expand that, push the envelope, finagle, scheme any way they could to add powers that the Constitution didn't permit, which is where the term implied and the concept of implied powers came from.
Well, you talked about power being like a drug. Power is a drug. It is a very seductive drug, and it will destroy it like any other.
Oh, well, it's people forget, and this is why you should study history, folks, because the rule of history is tyranny. The United States Constitution is the exception. In fact, the American Revolution is the only revolution in history that in which it didn't result in another tyranny.
It produced something better than what it started out with.
Precisely. I mean, and it almost did result in a tyranny, because if you recall, in 1782, I forget the name of the incident, but basically the Continental Army was going to march on Philadelphia because they hadn't been paid. They hadn't gotten their pensions, and then George Washington went to the Continental Army, and he read an address, and he was, because he had disgruntled soldiers, and the soldiers that he had led, and he stopped, put on a pair of spectacles. And he said, "You'll have to pardon me, gentlemen, I have grown blind in the service of my country," and that diffused the whole thing. So even the American Revolution could have ended up being, going the way of the French Revolution.
But the hand of God was there to straighten things out, just like Ben Franklin said it was.
Amen, brother. Amen. So now we go into the big stories of the week. Now, I drove myself hoarse going over the big stories of the week on American Daily Review at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review earlier today between noon and 2 p.m. Pacific time. And as Doug does, I'll just go through and summarize before we focus on stories 2 and 1, because I know Alex wants to talk about Cheryl Atkinson's book. Story number 9, Virgin Galactic crash burns and kills. That was an experimental space plane, the Virgin Galactic. Basically, it's the private sector manned space flight industry, because we don't have a public. We don't, NASA doesn't send people into space anymore. We have to hitch rides with the Russians. So this was a space plane that crashed and burned just yesterday, and so it's looking a little dicey for the private, at least right now, for the private sector space industry. But Virgin Galactic says they are going to forge right ahead anyway, and good for them. I hope they succeed. Story number 8, the newest IRS scandal. Did you know that the IRS is seizing bank accounts of innocent people who are not under criminal investigation with no court order? Yes, you did!
And they can't get the money back even if they prove they didn't do anything wrong.
Well, sometimes the IRS will offer partial settlements. So, in other words, innocent people are trying to get back money that was stolen from them by the IRS. They're not, and the IRS doesn't even offer them all the money back that they took, and they're spending more in legal fees than they had taken in the first place.
That's it. That's the idea.
That's the idea. Story number 7, Democrats target political speech. This was kind of a follow-up to one of last week's big stories regarding the Federal Election Commission and the Obama members. He's in a 3-3 deadlock, and Obama members of the Federal Election Commission are just hell-bent on regulating internet political speech. So blogs like Political Pistachio, for example, could all have be subject to FEC regulation if they get their way. I wouldn't be surprised to see an Obama executive order to that effect after the election. Story number 6, Hillary Clinton's economic lesson. Businesses don't create jobs. Well, I'll tell you, there is one reason, and one reason only, why she said that. She wants to be president. The left hates her, and she's trying to get to Elizabeth Warren's left.
And she's a Marxist.
Well, she's always been a Marxist, and of course she believes this bilge, but the left hates her. The left thinks she sold out a long time ago, and they love Elizabeth Warren. And by the way, Barack Obama supports Elizabeth Warren too, so Hillary is trying anything she can do to realize her infernal dream of becoming president of the United States. That's what all that was about.
What has that woman ever done to deserve more than the position of dog catcher?
Nothing.
At least then she'd be dealing with her own kind.
Hillary Clinton is the most overrated politician, certainly of her generation, maybe in American history. And she's not going to be the 2016 Democrat nominee. Mark it down, November the 1st, 2014. Jasmine predicted it. Hillary Clinton will not be the 2016 Democrat nominee.
I think Obama challenges her position as you just stated, but it doesn't matter. They're both cut from the same cloth. They're both Alinskyites.
She was an original disciple of Saul Alinsky. She was an Alinskyite, but when Barack Obama was still communizing in Chicago. Story number 5, Islam in American school lessons, specifically a Tennessee grade school in which a grade school teacher, a public school teacher, emphasis on public, decided to freelance by passing out Nation of Islam flyers that smeared the presidents on Mount Rushmore, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln as racists. And yes, they smeared the great emancipator as being a racist. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the school children brought home the flyer, showed it to his mother. His mother screamed bloody murder, went to the school superintendent, who was just couldn't believe that one of his teachers did something like this. That's how these things always seem to work, it seems to me. And it makes me wonder how many of these stories never make the national news, frankly. Story number 4, Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi is home, ladies and gentlemen. The Mexicans released him.
Ara!
Huzzah! 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 And, of course, it was absolutely no thanks to the White House. You know who? It was 2 Republican congressmen and former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. The White House had nothing to do with it, folks. So
Obama wouldn't even mention it when he met with the president of Mexico.
No, absolutely not. He didn't care. Why should he care? It's not. If it doesn't benefit him politically, then he could care less.
Marines are the enemy.
That pretty much sums it up. Story number 3, election 2014. Did you hear? You might have heard somewhere that there's an election on Tuesday. I know it's gotten buried with Ebola and the Islamic State and beheadings and hatchet attacks and shooting up the Canadian Parliament and all the other things swirling around, all the other Obama-inspired crises. But yeah, there's a midterm election on Tuesday, amazingly enough. And most experts, and I think they're right, are predicting that we're not going to know who is going to control the Senate on Tuesday night. We probably won't know on Wednesday night. We may not know until January 6th, which is the scenario that I find fascinating. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the Senate alignment is 50 Republicans, 49 Democrats. Now, hopefully the GOP will just blow the Democrats away and it won't be an issue. But what if we got to January 6th, 2015, there's 50 Republican senators, 49 Democrat senators in the 114th Congress. And see, Georgia's runoff election would be January 6th, and the odds are that the David Perdue versus Michelle Nunn race in Georgia is going to end up on a runoff. Well, what if that runoff election, which would take place on January 6th of the next year, 3 days before the 114th Congress is supposed to convene, what if that ended up a photo finish and they had a recount? We may not know for months into next year who's going to ultimately control the United States Senate. And, of course, there's Illinois voting machine calibration errors. They got the same thing in Maryland. There's funny business going on in Colorado and North Carolina. So don't be surprised if it doesn't go the GOP's way, even though it absolutely should, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's story number 2, Ebola's political backlash. There's all kinds of items here, but I want to make brief mention of Kaci Hickox, who was the nurse who went over to West Africa with Doctors Without Borders, helped to treat and fight Ebola, but then couldn't be bothered to stay in quarantine for 3 weeks when she came back. And so she protested. She called it a human rights violation. She screamed bloody murder, and the White House weighed in on her side. They demanded that Governors Christie of New Jersey and Cuomo of New York, who, by the way, he's up for re-election on Tuesday, demanded that they release the quarantine, and they did. They knuckled under to the pressure. She was released. She went back to Maine, where the Republican governor in Maine, Paul LePage, also said, no, you're going into quarantine, signed an order to that effect, and a liberal activist judge in Maine struck that down. She's been released, and who knows if she has Ebola or not, but I guess we and a lot of other people are going to find out.
A nice epidemic like that is just the crisis that the Obama administration would like to bring up. You got to notice that today Fox News says that there's evidence that the enterovirus that's been killing kids across America was brought in by immigrants.
It's strange how it started right as school started, didn't it? And then story number 1, Stonewalled by Cheryl Atkinson. What did you have to say about that, Alex?
Oh, man, I got almost 2 pages handwritten, so I'm going to have to go quick on it. Cheryl Atkinson is a tremendous reporter. She's got 5 Emmys for investigative reporting. She got the Edward R. Murrow Trophy for her stuff on Fast and Furious, and she says, well, she just got too effective, and CBS is now was spiking her stories. So she resigns, and then she realizes there's something wrong with her computer. She brought in a guy, she won't name him, but she calls him number 1, from the government to look at her computer, and the guy says, this is outrageous, quote, worse than anything Nixon ever did. I couldn't believe it, like it could happen in the United States of America. She brought in another guy. It turns out that her phone was tapped. Her computer she's standing there with her cell phone, looks down at her computer, and it's erasing itself. The information is disappearing. She takes her cell phone and videotapes the keypad and the screen as somebody is eliminating the material that she's going to use the next day on the air.
And it's all in her book, Stonewalled by Cheryl Atkinson. It's at Amazon.com right now. And go ahead, Alex, and plug yourself.
Well, I just want to say that the Obama administration has made it abundantly clear that the American people no longer enjoy the protections of the constitutional rights. We are now in a fascist dictatorship. I'll stand by that. I don't care.
And I am, of course, Jasmius. I write at politicalpistachio.com. I podcast at the Hard Starboard Radio Network.
Now, understand, Commander, that torpedo did not self-destruct. You heard it hit the hull, and I was never here.